Pete Yost here for the Unbuild It podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our Unbuild It podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Unbuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Basic.
Hello.
He's super excited for some reason. We are not in our normal studio. We are recording remotely from an undisclosed location. So if there is noise in the background, that is just a bag full of kittens trying to get out of a closet. And we are joined today by Ben Bogie. Say hello, Ben.
Hello, Ben.
And this is one of our people you should know. Hey, you should be paying attention. You should think about talking to this person if you run into them in public.
Could potentially be people you shouldn't know.
It could be.
But we'll have to decide at the end of this.
Depends on what your lawyer thinks. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll let the listener be the one making the decision on that. And the format for this sort of conversation is, Ben, it's your turn to talk.
Ouch.
Nice
Put
lead
him
in that you gave
on
me here.
the spot.
Give us what do you do now and how did you get here?
Okay, what I do now is a couple of things. I'm a project manager. That's my day-to-day, or what it says on my business card.
In the construction field.
Correctly. High-end, high-performance residential. So we do nothing but high-performance residential. Much of that tends to be high-end in Western Connecticut and Eastern New York State, Hudson Valley.
That's just a different way of saying we're real expensive, high-performance builders.
Yes.
We do fancy people stuff.
We may be slow, but at least we're expensive.
Yeah. Make up for it.
So, yeah, I build houses for people. I'm second or third generation high performance builder, depending on how you want to look at that. And what that means is back in the late 70s, my grandfather was very science minded and became aware of the work that was going on in Canada with high performance building after the oil embargoes, and took a liking to it. And my father was running a construction company, and they started building super insulated high performance houses in the early 80s. So I've been brought up, tried to avoid being a carpenter, but I would get a paycheck for putting a tool bag on. And I always had building science drilled into me from a young age. So thermal bridging, air sealing, that kind of stuff. So
you bring up, the oil embargo, and people had panic attacks, and that begat, high performance building and Chrysler making the K car and the import of Toyotas and all these things. And I think about that and I go, yeah, and we have about the same amount of interest in high performance building as we did back then, it feels like.
No, definitely not. And I can say that because I lived through it. So that was very much the pioneer days of high performance building. And it didn't catch back then because, energy costs went way down. So nobody wanted to pay attention to it anymore. But I have watched throughout my career because I've been brought up around it to see how it's growing and how I think we're actually kind of at a point of market adoption, or like we're tipping the top of the roller coaster right now, and people are starting to become aware of it.
If you couldn't tell, that was what I was hoping you'd say.
I walked right into that. I'm a little slow.
Well, and the code is catching up. I mean, the code is not too terribly far off of Passive House at this point. Like, it's closer than it's ever been. And more code is adopted nationally than it ever has been before.
And we have, Passive House is sitting in on the ASHRAE councils now to drive further code development, stuff like that that's coming. 15 years ago when we were putting 2 inches of polyiso on the exterior of a building, people thought we were crazy. The guys at the local lumberyard, you're doing what? But now this is part of the code, in certain, climate zone 5 and above, we've got continuous insulation required now. So this stuff is coming, and we're going to get dragged along kicking and screaming, whether we like it or not.
Do you think that the rest of the industry goes without kicking and screaming?
Oh, no, they're going to kick and scream.
Okay.
And we see that. We see it because when we look at code adoptions state by state, many of them will take the IECC energy portion right out of the code.
Yeah.
And they'll just
modify it so that you can still do 2x4 walls if you put in a 95% efficient furnace.
All sorts of stupid
which is what our
things like
market
that.
has done.
Or then I spent a number of years working in Maine, so they took out all the blower door testing requirements when that started coming in 2015 cycle, I think it was, and they've avoided that, and now they're going to adopt it. So we've lost this iterative series of years where guys could have started to learn how to do
institutional
blower door.
knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And now they're going to be forced, and they're going to get caught flat-footed, having to now comply.
So, well, we're on the topic of blower doors. When was the first time that you had to blower door a house that you were working on? Or have you?
Have I? Yeah. Well, I have. I own a blower door setup, RetroTech setup, and have for about 7 or 8 years. So I think that was the first time that I really did it, is when I had a phase where I thought I was going to get out of wearing a tool belt, and I was going to become an energy auditor. And I actually went to Atlanta
To work.
Took my BPI or my ResNet training with Allison Bales. And then I realized that there was no money in doing energy auditing because the states gutted all the incentives out of it at that time. But yeah, I've been blower door testing all of our projects and doing diagnostic blower door testing for 7-8 years, something like that. It's one of the best learning tools I've had in my career. Yeah, a blower door combined with an infrared camera, you start to understand how buildings work in a
Everything that you've screwed up ever.
Oh, absolutely.
And every person that has ever screwed up working on your house.
Oh, yeah. Dan Colbert, who I used to work for, has a saying. He says, if you ever want to guarantee you'll never sleep well again, is learn building science. Because you're going to wake up in the middle of the night and you're going to remember all those things that you did on that project and second guess yourself and wait for the lawyers to call.
I think I bought my blower door in 2015 or 2016, so close to the same time.
That time.
And I immediately went and did a blower door test at a house that we had built for my parents, and then did a blower door test at the house that I lived in that was a 60s ranch. And then like 3 weeks later, the city was running a program where we get rebates for upgrading things, and one of the metrics is air sealing. And the guy came to do the blower door test, and I hadn't met him before. And I said, it's about a 7.5. And he was like, where'd you pull that number out of your butt? And I said, well, we'll see what it is. And then he set up the door, ran the test. It was like 7.6. And he was staring at me, and he was like, do you own a blower door? Because I'm fairly certain I'm the only person in town that owns a blower door, and I've never had anybody guess anything. And I was like, yeah, I own my own blower door, and it's been less than 2 weeks since I did a blower door
tested
test.
the house.
Yeah, and it was roughly the same temperature, no wind. It was a good day to blower door test. What about you, Steve?
I don't own a blower door.
When was the first time that you had to blower door test?
First blower door test was probably 1990.
No, one of your projects.
One of my projects. When would that have been?
To clarify, Steve was about to talk about BSC experience and blower door testing.
96. One of my projects was probably like 2004 or something like that. 2005.
Passive house?
No, the builder in the Southwest that I did all their design work for a production home builder, but he did a blower door test on every house he built.
That's impressive.
And that's
at that
like,
time.
We had a year's where 600 homes in 1 year. And he had a guy that commissioned everyone. And they gave a energy guarantee on every house they built too.
Did they bill it as an energy guarantee, or didn't they call it a comfort guarantee or something like that? Yeah,
they might have had a fancy
like your bill won't be over this amount. If you
as long as you operate under these conditions, then your bill will not exceed this.
How many comfort guarantees would you be willing to give on your houses?
Oh, I'd be happy to give a comfort guarantee. That's why we get hired.
Yeah, there we go. I feel like most builders would have a panic attack and be like, I have to guarantee what? Mm-hmm. People are going to be comfortable. And it's like, I don't think that I understood it until I got to move into one that I built, because we live in a house.
It's a whole different
And now
experience.
it's like, oh, this is not terribly difficult. The metrics are easy to understand, and once you get to a certain level of air sealing and insulation and quality windows, and it's like, oh, this is really not complicated the way that people think it is.
I'd be more comfortable giving a comfort guarantee than I would to give an energy guarantee, because so much of the occupant behavior is going to, like you're saying, if you operate within a certain set of parameters, but so much of the occupant
2004,
behavior,
that was, I mean, people barely plugged things in back then.
The benefit they had is they had a guy that was, he did all the design, HVAC design, ventilation design, and he was the one that commissioned the project. So he knew the ins and outs. He knew where their buildings, if it was going to fail, where it was going to fail. And when a bad number came up, he knew how to troubleshoot it and solve for it.
Spots were.
Yeah. When you're doing, 500-600 homes a year, you get a lot of experience very quickly.
And they had a decent architect?
And they had a decent architect. That we developed pretty good. Well, the key there was a decent owner that actually cared about what he built. And, two things that he cared about. He cared that he delivered a good product. And the other thing that he always would say is that he will always build a house that one of his employees can afford to buy.
That's
so we had a range of houses that went from, I think the smallest house was probably like 925 square footage. And we went up to right around 4K on some of the more luxurious models.
I don't think I can afford to build a house or I could buy a house that I would build if I wasn't the one building it for myself.
Right.
I couldn't afford to hire us.
Yeah, he was really good about that.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Steve sells this as a very noble thing, and I agree, but there are also other markets to compete in. It's just his choice.
I mean, they didn't choose.
It's not to say that Ben's company is ridiculous and shouldn't know.
No, we
You haven't said the name of the company, or did they tell you not to say the name? Or
no, the lawyers have said it's okay for me to associate myself with the company. So I work for a company called BPC Green Builders. They've been doing nothing but high performance for 23 years. Which is a pretty rare track.
I haven't tracked it down. Is it two brothers or something?
It's two brothers. Yeah.
So I designed a house for one of the brothers years ago. It was a 4-square that in Connecticut, and I forget exactly. It was a while ago, but they came to Building Science, and what's their last name begins with
Trolley.
a T or something? Yeah, Trolley.
Chris and Mike Trolley.
Yep. And it's TROLLE.
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah. So we did I don't know if it ever got built or not. But it was a 4-square or 9-square, very traditional house that we designed for them. That was high performance when they were just getting into it.
Yeah.
So
they were, definitely that early adopter phase. They had the first passive house in Connecticut. It's Mike's personal house, one of the owner's personal house, first passive house. Very much, my father and like I was talking about before, my grandfather, they were that pioneer phase. And then there was the early adopter phase. That's Chris and Mike, who I work for. And now we have like broad market acceptance. It feels like that's where
that pioneer phase. For those of you that aren't familiar with that part of our building history, is like people building their own solar collectors.
Yeah.
And crap, like real out there. I mean, even in the early 80s, my dad was doing double wall stuff that like the lumberyard was worried about selling him materials because he was buying too much materials for one house and they couldn't understand
what he was doing.
Building two walls. Yeah. Also, the best lesson from the first double wall he ever built was vertical studs, 16 inches on center, horizontal studs, 24 inches on center on the inside, which meant if you wanted to hang a picture, it had to be at 6 feet. That was the only place that there was something to mount
blocking.
To. Yeah. No blocking whatsoever. Hadn't even considered that they might hang things on the wall. So I think they ended up buying a bunch of smaller artwork when we moved into that house so that they could just hang on a finished nail in the gypsum board.
So we have the bedroom in our house. I live in a 1870s little salt box. But somebody at some point before we bought the house, like cross-ferred the bedroom walls, whatever, to flatten them or something like that. So it's the same thing. We only have like hanging locations at 4 feet and 6 feet.
If you want to hang a TV, you have to take a layer of wall off to get back to something solid.
My wife wanted some shelves hung up, and she's like, "Why'd you put it there?" I'm like, "It's the only place we can put it."
Or it's, why is there a 6x6 sheet of plywood behind the TV screwed to the wall?
I had a client that wanted a TV mounted to a fireplace, but it was going to be mounted for like 2 years, and then they were going to put an addition on. And she said, you can use the 2 holes that are already there that hold the mantle up. And so we mounted a like 3 foot by 3 foot piece of 3/4 plywood with those 2 holes, and then mounted everything to it. And then they never put the addition on, but the TV's still there.
It's still on the plywood. Yeah.
It is. I painted the plywood close to a brick color too. Like I took.
Did you like mask the little lines in it?
No, I took the fan deck though, and like picked like 4 colors that were close to the brick, and then had the paint store mix me rattle cans. And I did like the,
I was gonna
80s Dodge pickup camouflage version.
I was thinking you were going to do like the 80s sponge painting, the late 80s sponge painting. Yeah.
I definitely lived in a house or two that had sponge painting on it, but I never did it. It was my mother.
It was a thing.
We had wood paneling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your generation had wood paneling. My generation had painted wood paneling.
Wood paneling
exactly.
Wood paneling with acoustical ceilings a foot lower than the hard ceiling, which made it good for...
Or the staple up acoustical, too.
No, we didn't have staple up. We had the typical grid stuff, but the cool thing is I could hide stuff up there that my mom couldn't get to.
Not that you would be hiding.
Not that I would be hiding anything, but I'm just saying there was an opportunity there that...
My father still to this day gets excited about certain paneling. You'll take him into a house and be like, oh, that's the 8-inch walnut. That's the nice stuff. I'm like, oh.
I was the last of 6. So like when I left the house, my dad's like, just don't go to jail or something. All right. Just come back whenever.
I don't want to have to come pick you up.
Yeah. That's
try not to be a bother.
Yeah.
Don't burn anything to the ground, please.
Right. What does that say about you that they were like, okay, no more. This is enough.
My mom was 41. Probably.
That
was the perfect opportunity for you to say, perfection.
I'll literally drop a bomb on you. She was 41 and I was 11 pounds when I was born. And like 24 inches. So I was like a 4-month-old baby that came out walking.
You came out with a suitcase. Where are we moving?
Off to work.
There you go.
So, Ben, how long have you been at BPC?
Closing in on 2 years now. Yeah. And we're in a transition where we're actually moving the company to a worker-owned cooperative. And I will be a part owner of the company come January 1st.
So the people you work for right now are hippies.
No, I wouldn't go so far as to say that by any stretch of the imagination.
I'm kidding. The worker-owned cooperative partnered with early passive house adoption. That spells greeny weenie.
Yeah, we're greeny weenies. I'll give you that. Hippies is a totally different connotation. Yeah.
And where before that?
So before that, I was working for Dan Colbert up in Portland, Maine. I did almost 4 years working for him. Previous to that, I had owned my own business for about 10 years. Decided when I had my
selling small reptiles or
on the black market. But when my son was born, I decided I didn't want to keep doing the 60, 70-hour weeks. And I decided I was going to take a job for somebody. And I figured if I'm going to go ahead and take a job for somebody, I might as well get a change of scenery at the same time. So I moved from Connecticut with my wife and son up to Maine. Spent 4 years there. COVID hit. Decided we missed being near our family. Back to Connecticut. And I consider myself lucky that I've landed with the company that I'm with. Because we're doing interesting work. It's a good crew.
Okay, so I would, because I know the company that you work for, I would say that they are probably a decent predictor as to where the market heads if people continue to adopt. I mean, obviously, something ridiculous like extremely low energy prices could slow things down, or politics getting in the way of things like solar panels or whatever. Where do you think the industry is 5 to 20 years from now? Do you think we get to a point where passive house is the standard?
20 years, maybe. 5 years, definitely not. Definitely not. And I don't know that. I don't know. There's so many what ifs that quantify where we'll end up there with, like you said, politics, energy costs, who knows, geopolitical stuff. I'd like to think that we're headed in that direction. And I think we are headed in that direction. But we'll have to drag some people kicking and screaming along. But one of the things that I want to frame this in, and people generally think about high
Hey,
performance.
it's a framing joke.
Put a header over that one, would you? People generally think
You're
of, like,
crippling me.
oh, buddy, you're still on this.
He's a
That's
jack. He's a jack of all
silly.
trades. He's a jack of all trades when it comes
That's
to
very
puns.
silly.
I'm going
I
to
gotcha.
trimmer this humor right out of here now. But people constantly think of like high performance building is all about energy. Like we're trying to get low energy usage. And that's one of the things that comes along with it. And it was one of the early drivers of people understanding high performance building. But the way we frame what we do now is we're giving people houses that are comfortable, houses that are healthy, and houses that are durable. And those are things that all just come along with it. And the energy savings is a byproduct to me of that. You know, not many people come to us saying, I want really low energy bills. They come to us and they say, I want a house.
Yeah,
that's
someone that
healthy
can
to
afford
live
your
in.
rates in a 5,000 square foot house probably can afford
Whatever
an
the
extra
energy's gonna
$200
cost.
a
Yeah.
year of natural gas or whatever.
it's going to be.
Or they can just afford the solar array to go to zero. And
Exactly.
They don't care.
They're coming to us because they want to, either have an ecological impact, a health impact, or a lot of times we're seeing clients that are hitting retirement age and they want a house that they don't have the maintenance concerns with. And if you build high performance assemblies, you can.
And they want to zero out the political impact of what's happening around the world, right? I have a lot of clients that do that. Like, I want a zero energy house because I don't want to care what the price of a barrel of oil is.
Well, that's it. Yeah, especially as like you get people that are maybe moving on to fixed incomes in retirement or being more mindful of where their money's going. They
They
can
buy an
remove
electric car and drive the car off of their
throw
house.
the PV array on the roof, and they know that our energy bills are taken care of.
Yeah, I don't know if passive house will ever become the standard. Not because it isn't good. I think we're creatures of comfort and convenience. We're also creatures of crisis. Like, we rarely do the right thing when it's time to do the right thing. If it was true, then we'd all be 185 pounds and looking pretty svelte.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Well, don't you worry. I told you. I told you many a times, get that gym membership money back. It ain't working for you.
Refund.
But I think what happens is as we move towards the future, people realize that there's things that are become of more value and more important to people, and that new systems develop or existing systems develop better. Like, maybe someday we'll have a solar panel that can get 1,000 watts per panel instead of 365. And it might not be the same type of solar cell technology. It'll be some other vacuum, something technology, whatever. But the idea that, okay, I don't necessarily have to build a passive house. I can just put 8 of these panels up on my garage and I power the whole house, because everything else, the loads have come down and we figured out how to build a better refrigerator, better air handlers. We have better insulation quality in the house, better windows because of some kind of technology, so that we're driving the load down and we're finding a way to elevate the source of stuff. So,
Yeah. People also get hung up with these connotations that like we're doing high performance building for environmental reasons. And, the whole discussion over climate change is politically loaded. But I try and couch it this way, that you can remove climate change completely out of the equation. And to me, doing what we're doing is just good stewardship. So we're reducing our consumption of materials and energy so that the next generations can have a shot to use them.
Or just that a house is thousands of decisions. Let's make the best decisions we can, and drop the label. I'm making it my personal endeavor to just get rid of any and all labels before I'm no longer here, and make them disappear before I have to. And
so how do you know which underwear to buy at the store?
Exactly.
He tries them on.
The cheetah
prints.
Yeah.
cheetah print.
Whichever ones tickle his fancy
There you
immediately.
go. But I think that the idea of like high performance house, it's okay. I get it. It's some marketing effort,
And it changes.
we could talk about that, and it does change, because what kind of performance are you talking about?
I mean, even the ones that have strict labels change.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just build a really good house. Not even
Is that
pretty
what we're
good
gonna
house.
call it?
We're going to call it a really good
we're gonna
house.
label it?
I'm stepping it up. For those of you that just got the book, I'm going with a new one and calling out the really
good house.
The really
I'd say
good
the
house.
pretty good house is a really good house.
Well, it's a pretty good house.
Well, maybe they should have called it that then.
Right. I'm going with really good house.
we did the marketing on that effort here. Let's be real.
So,
Pretty.
It is
pretty
a-
good.
but
it is
that whole concept is spot on.
It's a really good conversation that I end up having with clients. Like the informed clients will say like, oh, passive house or LEED or net zero. And I'm like, if we look at LEED, there's the bicycle rack argument that like you get the same number of points for a bicycle rack as you do for air sealing, and nobody's guaranteed to use the bicycle rack. Or net zero. I can make a Walmart building net zero if you give me enough space to put solar panels on it.
And they should.
They should.
Right? Any of those big box stores, like there should be you can't build one of those in America unless 60% of your energy is site generated or some crazy rule.
To what you were saying, Steve, about like removing labels, one of the things that I've always thought was a good idea is to get rid of the temperature on thermostats in a house, because we all have these like conditioned
Just an
responses that it should just
Up or
have
down.
warmer and colder buttons, because everybody thinks, oh, my house has to be 72 degrees or my house has to be 68 degrees, and we have this tie to this number, and if it
now
doesn't
you're
say
opening
that
a can of
number,
worms on me.
if it doesn't say this number, then we're not comfortable, you know?
Because I get crazy clients that come and say, well, I need a master bedroom that's 16 by 16. I'm like, where'd you get that number? Well, my sister's is 14 by 15, and I think we need to be a little bigger than hers.
And I want to be able to say, suck it, loser.
It's like, I mean, the whole, but the whole
She stole your
square
soccer ball.
footage on that. I mean, a lot of the success of that room depends on where the windows are and where the door comes in to the room.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference, because you could make a better room smaller
Well,
if you had to.
You go one step further and we get clients. I mean, you and I get clients even that say, well, we need 2,200 square feet.
Yeah.
Well, where did you come up with that? 2,200 square feet of what?
Well, the house
I can do it in one room and you'll be able to fit all your furniture and there'll be tons of free floor space.
Yeah.
And maybe you should throw some stuff out.
10-foot ceilings. And
That's a good conversation. So, Ben, I suspect that you've listened to the podcast but if you haven't heard our discussion of this is a safe space, none of our wives listen to this. My wife complained after we moved into our house about not having enough storage room. And I said, our house is double the size of the last house that we lived in, and you didn't complain about not having enough storage room there. I think we should
with a
have put
2.5 car garage.
We should have put more crap in the
That has a
dumpster before
10-foot
we
He's
left.
got more storage room in that garage than the total square footage of my house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no reason. And all it turns into is a place where we keep stuff that should have been thrown away.
Yeah, we need less
Where
stuff,
things
not
go to
more
die.
space.
Yeah.
We need less stuff, not more space.
Yeah. I moved bicycles to get past like pool floaties, to get past a treadmill, to get to a piece of artwork that I've wanted to hang up since we moved in. And I was just like, man, some of that is used, some of it is not. I mean, obviously that treadmill, now that it's not inside the house, we don't use it for hanging clothes anymore.
You're clearly not using it to exercise on either.
Oh, ouch.
We were just actually having a conversation inside of our company this week, because we find ourselves building these, what I think are somewhat ridiculously large houses for, 2 people to live in. And we are going to actively try and, when we're in the conversation with the architects, say, one of the best things you guys can do to, lower your energy bills or make a lower environmental impact is to make the house
Scale
smaller.
down.
Mm-hmm. And that's a tough one, because a lot of times people don't want to do that because the architect's fees are often tied to the percentage of however much they build,
or even just time.
The builder's profit is based off of the scope of the project. So if the project gets bigger, we make more money. But I think it's
And you just don't want to be the one that has to tell somebody what they should and shouldn't have.
Well, or
It
risk
should be
pissing
their
off clients that are
be their
moving.
judgment.
Agree. No, totally. But we're going to at least bring it up in the conversation.
Yeah.
Because we think it's something important.
So in closing, Ben, well, first of all, thank you for joining us today. If you could say, like, here's 1 or 2 things that every builder should do to move in the direction that we're talking about. We all start from someplace, but where would be your recommendation for somebody that's new to the industry? Where do you start?
Excuse me. continue learning, I think, is the biggest thing. And the way you do that is you just pick something that interests you at the moment and you try and learn about it. You don't have to become an expert on it. You don't have to become proficient in it. But if you just take little things from your job and figure out more about them or how you can do them better, you'll continue to evolve.
And so you don't go from track built below code to passive house in one house.
No.
But there's no reason But there's no reason why you couldn't do it in a few.
Easily.
That's an easy one. It's getting loud enough in our recordings, and then all the noise stops the second I start to say that. That's hilarious. Okay, well, like I said, thanks for being a guest on the podcast today. Tell us about a couple places that people might be able to find you and the content that you generate.
Pub on 42nd Street. Friday nights between 4 and 7.
I'll wear your leopard print little number there.
A burned out Cadillac near the railroad tracks.
Just ask for Leroy. He'll know where
Comfortable. It's comfortable.
I am doing a number of educational things. I'm going to be at the Midwest Building Science Symposium coming up in Kansas City and then following in Chattanooga. I do stuff with JLC Live every year. The International Builders Show will be doing 2 large stages at IBS in Vegas coming up this year that we're putting all the programming together for. And I'm sure there's a number of other things. But
and
those
a podcast.
Are in mind. A podcast. I'll be on the Build It podcast. I'm here. Yep. I sometimes manage to post stuff on Instagram. I do quite a bit of stuff with Fine Home Building and Green Building Advisors. So we've got video series out with both of them on projects we're doing.
So in other words, use the internet to find Ben when he's going to be in person and when he puts content out. Okay, we could have said that.
Google. Just Google.
The Google. Steve, closing thought?
I have none.
Okay. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have questions for Ben,
smash that like button.
Too bad he can't read.
Smash that like button.
Have a good day.